The Clumsy Beauty and Her Aunts by Patrick Kennedy, Part 2. The poor girl slept little that night, and when she was left alone the next morning, she began her spinning with a heavy heart. Though she had a nice mahogany wheel and the finest flax she had ever seen, the thread seemed to break every time she touched it. One moment it was as fine as a cobweb, and the next as coarse as wool. At last she pushed her chair back, left her hands fall into her lap, and burst out crying. Just then a small old woman with surprisingly big feet appeared before her, as if out of nowhere, and said, "What ails you, you handsome girl?" "Oh," cried Ursula, "haven't I all that flax to spin before tomorrow morning, and I'll never be able to have even 5 yards of fine thread of it put together. And would you think it bad to ask poor Kalyak Cushmore to your wedding with the fine young prince? If you promise to invite me, all 3 pounds of your flax will be made into the finest of thread while you're taking your sleep tonight." Ursula was overjoyed. "Indeed, you must be there and welcome, and I'll honor you all the days of your life." "Very well," said Kalyak Cushmore. "Stay in your room till tea time, and then tell the queen she may come in for her thread as early as she likes tomorrow morning." Ursula did as she said, and the old woman was as good as her promise. The next morning Ursula woke to find thread finer and evener than the gut of fly fishers. "What a brave girl!" cried the queen. "I'll get my own mahogany loom brought to you, but you needn't do anything more today. Work and rest, that's my motto. Tomorrow you'll weave all this thread, and who knows what may happen," she added with a smile. So Ursula spent another day with the prince, and she was so happy in his company that she almost forgot that task ahead of her. But the next morning, when she sat down at the queen's loom, she was even more frightened than before. Her trembling fingers couldn't even put the warp in the gears, nor use the shuttle. She was sitting there in the greatest grief, when a little old woman with mightily wide hips suddenly appeared before her. She said her name was Kalyak Crummenmore, and she offered the same bargain as Kalyak Cushmore. Eagerly Ursula accepted, and great was the queen's pleasure the next morning when Ursula showed her linen as fine and white as the finest paper. "What a darling girl," said the queen. "Take your ease with the ladies and gentlemen today, and if you have all of this made into nice shirts tomorrow, you may present one of them to my son and be married to him out of my hand." Oh, how poor Ursula trembled the next day as she sat with scissors, needle, and thread in hand. She was so near the prince now, and yet maybe would be soon so far from him. But she waited patiently till a minute after noon. An old woman with a big red nose appeared before her. The woman introduced herself as Kalyak Shronmamora, and she made the same offer as the two before her. Ursula accepted with relief, and sure enough, when the queen paid her an early visit the next morning, there were a dozen fine shirts lying on the table. End of Part 2.